What you see here is the explosion of a Russian ammunition depot and what it currently looks like after being hit by friendly fire. More on this in the report. As of June 8, 2026, we are in the 5th year and on day 106 since the start of the full-scale invasion. A warm welcome to the Situation Report. In today's report, we will look at a lot of things. We will look at the developments in Crimea, we will continue to look at the Ukrainian attacks on the supply routes, and we will also look at many other things that we will see here throughout the report. But what I will look at tomorrow is something I would like to briefly explain to you. Because, just briefly, the company Deal Defense, which in my opinion manufactures the best missile-based air defense system, has invited me to be present at a reveal at the ILA in Berlin. Of course, I spared no expense or effort and will go there tomorrow. I'm sure there will be interesting discussions, innovations, and developments to report. It's still uncertain if there will be a situation report tonight. It depends on Hotel VLAND. For now, let's focus on air defense systems. About a week ago, we already saw how additional Pantsir air defense systems were installed on high-rise buildings in Moscow. Now, there are new recordings. This time, a helicopter is once again transporting a Pantsir SMD air defense system onto the roof of a building. Around Moscow, more and more of these positions are appearing on rooftops, towers, and other elevated locations. These are all legitimate targets. What's interesting is the fact that Russia is apparently continuing to increase its efforts. Someone who is convinced they've already won the war or are on the verge of victory usually doesn't turn the capital into a fortress. The Ukrainian drone attacks on airfields, refineries, oil terminals, arms factories, and naval facilities in recent days have shown that targets deep inside Russian territory are no longer untouchable. Apparently, Moscow is drawing its own conclusions from this, and it seems as if the illusion of a secure capital is still more important than the front, every military facility, and of course all the oil depots that are being attacked one by one. But for us, at least, the most important thing seems to be the logistics route in the south of occupied Ukraine. Imagine the joy of the soldiers who then see another truck explode in front of them because air defense really doesn't exist. While here, on some rooftops in Moscow, the next air defense system is being stationed. The Ukrainian drone units report a remarkably wide range of targets for the night of June 7th. Among the targets attacked were 2 air defense systems, locomotives, fuel depots, 6 substations, 10 communication towers, as well as other logistics and infrastructure targets. According to the published information, the Cossack Reconnaissance and Assault Brigade, Terek, in the occupied Luhansk region, was hit particularly hard. The brigade headquarters was located about 100 kilometers behind the front line and was therefore considered relatively safe. According to the reports, several buildings of the complex were destroyed, including the headquarters, a medical station, as well as warehouses with ammunition, fuel, and equipment. In total, there were reportedly 7 direct hits on the command area. Even Russian sources speak of severe damage and significant losses within the unit. The attacks also show how far Ukrainian drones are now able to operate. A brigade headquarters 100 kilometers behind the front used to be considered a relatively safe rear area. Today, it seems that even there, no one can assume they'll get through the night undisturbed. The city of Konstantinivka is slowly becoming the next major battle in the Donbass. Anyone looking at the map quickly realizes why such fierce fighting has been going on there for months. Since the beginning of the war, we have seen many major battles in this area. Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar, or more recently Toretsk. Now it seems that Konstantinivka is the next city to become the focus of the Russian summer offensive. For months, Russian units have been trying to approach the city through small advances and infiltrations. By now, the fighting is not only taking place on the outskirts of the city, but also within the city itself, and almost everywhere in the city. So Russian troops are present in several areas of the city, while the Ukrainians are still able to hold most of the city. In some cases, the positions of both sides are only a few blocks apart from each other. What's interesting here is the Russian approach. As was the case before in Pokrovsk, they're not necessarily trying to completely encircle the city. Instead, small groups are moving deeper into the city and positioning closer to Ukrainian supply lines. The goal here is to force the Ukrainians to retreat bit by bit. Still, you shouldn't look at the map only up to the city limits, because even if Russia should capture Konstantinivka in the coming months, the next question arises. What happens next? That's where things get a bit more complicated. The offensive towards Druzhivka hasn't started yet, and the Ukrainian positions in the Chasiv-Chasiv-Java area are still preventing full control over the high ground in this region. The town I just talked about, that's the city of Chasiv here. That would basically be the Russians' next target. As I said, they're still fighting their way through Konstantinivka here. There is no advance visible so far, and at the same time around Chasiv-Chasiv-Java, the Ukrainians are also able to hold this area very well. And because of that, the Russians can't break through from the northeast. At the same time, they also can't break through here towards the west to cut off the Ukrainian units here. That means that everything here is currently running, at least as it seems, systematically. The situation also reminds me a bit of the Battle of Toretsk a few months ago, because there too the Russians invested enormous forces in capturing a city, but then faced the problem that the next defensive line was already waiting for them. In this case, Konstantinivka. And so this could become an important tactical success, but the real strategic question is whether it will actually lead to an operational breakthrough. And I dare to question that, and of course the whole situation remains open. The Russians are currently fighting for the city, but their plans after a possible victory are unclear. Latest footage and information suggest a Russian glide bomb struck an ammunition depot in the Belgorod region. The massive explosion and the subsequent detonations suggest that large quantities of ammunition were stored there. Several sources suspect that this was a site for Iskander or S-300 missiles. If this is confirmed, then the depot would not have been destroyed by the Ukrainians, but by their own air force. Because so far, no Ukrainian attack has been reported. The Ukrainians also haven't reported any attack in this region. So on both sides, neither side is reporting anything there. There was no drone alert at that time either, or any kind of missile alert. This means either the Russians didn't notice the Ukrainian attack and the Ukrainians aren't reporting it, which is unusual, or the Russians destroyed it themselves. Such incidents are rare, but by no means unprecedented. Especially with the massive use of glide bombs over long periods of time, the risk of technical defects, navigation errors, and other malfunctions increases. And the Belgorod region is known for that. It's famous, notorious. Whenever I hear somewhere that a glide bomb has dropped, I could bet 200 euros on it, and I'd be right every time if I guessed Belgorod. Because that's usually the place where exactly these kinds of incidents happen. How many times have glide bombs crashed into residential buildings? How many times have glide bombs landed on the street, exploded, and in densely populated residential areas because the Air Force lost them? Partly, of course. Or on the other hand, they dropped them and they didn't open, and then they came down over the city. The Russians have complained about this several times. On the part of the Kremlin or the general staff, there was simply the message, well, then they just shouldn't live in the drop zone, because that can happen. A single misdrop like that is annoying. But if a rocket depot with Iskander or S-300 munitions goes up because of it, then that becomes an extremely embarrassing incident. And in addition, it's a militarily significant loss. And the images at least suggest that a lot more exploded there than just the glide bomb. The subsequent chain reaction looks more like a munitions depot than just a regular building. The fuel crisis in Crimea is worsening further. New footage shows a line of vehicles about 2.4 kilometers long at a gas station on the road between Sevastopol and the suburbs. The images match the numerous reports from recent days. There are long waiting times, rationing, and problems with fuel supply across the entire peninsula. Even where fuel is still available, drivers sometimes have to wait in line for hours and can only buy it if they have received a voucher. The main cause lies in the increasing problems with Russian logistics, or rather, the Ukrainian strikes, which have been putting pressure on tank farms, refineries, fuel transports, railway connections, and the main supply routes for weeks. At the same time, the Russians are also reporting restrictions and shortages not only in Crimea, but also in other regions of Russia. For the residents of the peninsula, the war has now finally become a part of everyday life. When you have to wait in a line several kilometers long just to have a chance to get gasoline or diesel, then the consequences of the attacks on the Russian supply infrastructure are no longer visible only on maps or satellite images, but directly on the streets of Crimea. Let's look at the Kherson region. Since the Kinburn spit has long been important to the Russians, but it now appears to be their downfall. According to the partisan group Attach, Ukrainian attacks on supply routes have massively disrupted the supply there. Ammunition, fuel, and food are reportedly reaching the positions only in insufficient quantities, if at all. The area is also regularly visited by Ukrainian drones that are hunting Russian soldiers. You can see for yourself the distance between the Ukrainian territory and that of the Russians isn't exactly large. We can quickly sketch it out here as well. So here, 10 kilometers, that's nothing a modern FPV drone couldn't cover today. With the withdrawal of the 337th Regiment from these positions, this area here is more or less left unguarded. The Ukrainians could land here. Here's another landing zone marked, which I had already marked before, in addition to Bravo and Charlie, which were located somewhere in this area some time ago. And it's possible that the Ukrainians could land here, but I don't think we'll see anything major here, at most just an attempt to increase the pressure, to launch more drones from here, probably again with special forces, just like it was in the past, if at all. Krasnodar's beaches are changing, as drone defense stations now appear alongside sun umbrellas and lounge chairs, just as vacation season begins. In the footage, you can see machine guns right on the beach, an image that reminds you more of a combat zone than a vacation spot. And honestly, I wouldn't try to justify any of this. The Ukrainians are basically doing exactly the same thing. There, you regularly see pickups or trucks with M2 Browning machine guns mounted on tripods, which are used for drone defense. Most of the time, they also have a thermal sight and additional acoustic and optical sensors that are supposed to make it easier to detect a bomb at night. At least visibly, the Russians don't have that here. Against slow-flying drones, such systems can definitely be effective. Of course, the Russian version looks a bit improvised. When the self-proclaimed second strongest army in the world sets up machine guns among beachgoers, it doesn't exactly remind you of the glossy brochures of modern military technology. Still, you shouldn't dismiss the practical benefit. So what's much more interesting is how far this war has now penetrated everyday life in Russia. A few years ago, such images at a holiday beach in the Sochi area would have been much harder to imagine. Today, anti-aircraft positions, sandbags, and machine guns are apparently increasingly becoming part of the landscape or cityscape there, and I would assume that Adel won't be the only place. The further the range of Ukrainian drones increases, the more coastal towns and sensitive facilities are likely to receive similar protective measures. There was reportedly an attack at the airfield near Prostar Sovo in the Ryazan region. The exact extent of the damage is still unclear. However, what's interesting is what is said to be located there. According to earlier reports, a research and production center for unmanned aerial vehicles was operated on the site. So, precisely the sector that has become increasingly important for Russia in recent years. If drone development or production is actually affected, that would be much more interesting than the airfield itself. Airfields can be repaired, runways can be fixed, but production facilities, test facilities, and specialized machines for development, well, those are much harder to replace. Thanks to all subscribers, channel members, and the Algae crew. Special thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Drenica, Silla, Dietrich Bry, and Meyerhofer. Please subscribe, like, comment, and see you in the next Situation Report.